Hi, it's Rob Timmings here from ECT for Health. Welcome back to another episode of Ectopics, the podcast for nurses.
In this episode, I wanted to talk to you about the KYJs. Now, the KYJs is a little bit of a tag phrase that I use for a blog that I started writing about 4 years ago. When we first started ECT for Health, I started writing these blogs. And I was trying to use blogging as a way of increasing our awareness of the ECT for Health brand and the education that I have to offer. And so I started writing under the pen name of Knowing Your Jargon, or KYJ. So KYJ, or Knowing Your Jargon. And obviously that sounds a little bit like KY jelly. And so that kind of had that nursing feel to it. If you get my drift. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about in this short little episode today, and that's about our Knowing Your Jargon blog. So where to find them? Well, we've got lots and lots and lots of these blogs. I've written well over 120, 130 or so of these blogs, and they're little short articles that I've written based on either questions that I've had in the classroom or when I'm doing tutorials with students or other nurses, when I occasionally will get questions if I'm doing some assignment preparation. Occasionally students or nurses that are doing further studies, or paramedics that are doing further studies, want to seek my advice on the writing of the assignment, or answering the question properly, or understanding physiology. I do some one-on-one tutorials using either Skype or the Zoom platform, and so I sort of started thinking, well, gee, a lot of questions seem to come up a lot. A lot of similar questions seem to come up. So I might be 1 week talking about diabetes with one student, and then the following week I might get the same question from another student that I'm doing some tutorials with. And so I thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to put all the common stuff into a little blog? And one of the things that I guess that paramedics and nurses struggle with from time to time is the plethora of medical jargon. And I think that we have so much jargon in our industry that we throw around, and we throw it around with each other almost in the expectation that the terminology that you're using is just a language that everybody else understands. And I don't know about you, but I've sat in lectures, or I've sat in even handovers in the ward, and the nurse that's handing over, or the person that's giving the lecture, has dropped a terminology that I'm not familiar with, and I was a little bit embarrassed to ask. And so it got me thinking, if I'm not the only one in the world that has difficulty understanding what terminology is and what the jargon is, perhaps there's others, and that there would be room for a quirky little blog called Knowing Your Jargon. And that's really where this started. So that's it for where the Knowing Your Jargon blog came from. You'll find it if you go onto the internet. You'll find it at www. And it's all one word. So it's Knowing Your Jargon, all one word. Knowing Your Jargon .blogspot blogspot.com. So Knowing Your Jargon .blogspot.com. And if you go to that webpage, what you'll actually find is 100 or more of the little short articles that I've written. Now, many of you have probably seen these articles without realising them. What I do is I cut and paste from my blog into our Facebook page. And so occasionally I'll throw a little educational post up on the Facebook page, almost as a teaser to draw out interest, to see whether there's some interest in running, say, a respiratory workshop, or running a cardiac seminar or a metabolic seminar. And so I write a little blog, and then I link that blog to our Facebook page, and we get a lot of really good reviews. I get a lot of really nice comments from people saying, that I make stuff easy to understand. So that's our Knowing Your Jargon. So where does that dovetail into, there's a jargon term for you, where does that connect to our podcast? Well, what I'd like to do, as well as interviewing really interesting nurses, and if you've been listening to our podcast, you've probably heard some pretty interesting interviews. I try to find some really interesting people to chat to. But other than just doing a bit of an interview style podcast, I'd like to do something a bit educational. And I think that I believe that that ECT for Health and myself are known for simplifying complex physiology, and so I'd like to start to do some podcasts from the blogs themselves. So to stay tuned, to subscribe to the podcast, you can get them from all the places that you get your podcasts. So if you're somebody who likes to listen to your podcast while you're exercising or driving to work, and knock over that CPD, our episodes will probably go for about sort of the 15 minutes to half an hour mark, unless I've got a really interesting interview with someone. But as far as these Blogspot, Knowing Your Jargon type episodes, then they're probably only going to be about 15 minutes long. And so that's it. If you're interested, stay tuned, and we'll start churning out some of those Knowing Your Jargon episodes so that you can listen to them. You don't just have to read them, but you can just listen to them in your own time. Righto, guys, I'm Rob Timmings. You've been listening to another episode of Ectopics. Hope you make your way over to our Blogspot page and have a little bit of a look at what I've got to offer. See you next episode, guys.